Addly doodly, YouTubers! It's me, the Geeky American Otaku. Happy New Year, everyone! I know it's a couple weeks late, but this is my first video of 2023. And this is my newest episode of 15-minute game show reviews. That is my new intro, by the way. I regret nothing. Anyway, I haven't done a real one of these reviews in over a year and a half, so I thought I'd try and get back onto the wagon here. Anyway, if you remember in this video series, I will give a review of a classic game show and talk about the people who worked on it, the gameplay, grade it, and talk about how I'd revive the show if I had the chance. And since this is the first video of the new year, how about I talk about a game show hosted by Mr. New Year himself?
Today is Monday, October 15th, 1990. Our champion, Ben Douglas, is returning with $14,365 and is 2 steps away from the ultimate challenge. Here is a media service executive, Karen Andre. And this is a marketing representative, Russell Giles. Ben is the champion. Karen and Russell, you are the challengers. And now, here is your master of the challenge, Dick Clark.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Don Morrow. And it is October 15th, and today Karen and Russell will be doing their very best to knock Ben out of his position.
Yes, that is indeed the legendary Dick Clark hosting a game show that is not the Pyramid. This underrated quizzer was one of 6 game shows that premiered in syndication during the 1990-91 TV season, and one of 3 that weren't revivals. All 6, unfortunately, met the cancellation acts at the end of the season, but the Challengers managed to get a full year before doing so. The Challengers debuted in syndication on September 3rd, 1990, with a preview episode the previous weekend, and aired its final episode on August 31st, 1991. And unlike other game shows, it remained in production for the whole year as opposed to ending production in the summer. The show was created by Ron Greenberg and was based on his previous NBC game from the 1960s, the Who, What, or Where game. Not much is known about him from the sites I've researched, but Greenberg worked on several game shows from the 1960s to the 1990s, including Tic-Tac-Dough, The Joker's Wild, Bullseye, The Original Sale of the Century, Dream House, The Money Maze, and Play the Percentages. Shows he packaged included The Big Showdown, The Pop and Rocker Game, and a 1990-91 revival of Let's Make a Deal. Years later, Greenberg created and hosted a weekly radio quiz show on Showcase Internet Radio called Anyone Can Play, Don't Call Us, We'll Call You, though he relinquished hosting duties to fellow TV game show veteran Larry Anderson from 2006 to 2008 when that show was canceled. The host of The Challengers was none other than Dick Clark, whose company also produced the show. Born in the New York City area in 1929, Dick Clark is an American icon. He began his career in radio in 1945 at the age of 16 at a family-owned radio station in Utica, and then later immigrated to television, first as a country music host and then as a newscaster. In 1952, he moved to Philadelphia and got a job at WFIL-AM, whose TV sister station launched a music, performance, and dance television program called Bandstand. Dick hosted the radio version and subbed for TV host Bob Horn when he was unavailable. After Horn was fired in 1956, Dick became the TV host as well, and the following year the ABC television network picked up the series nationally, changed the name to American Bandstand, and it made Dick a household name due to his natural rapport with the live teenage audience and dancing participants, including introducing millions of Americans to rock and roll and giving many artists their first national exposure. In fact, due to his perennially youthful appearance, which remained as he got older, and of course with American Bandstand's largely teen audience, he was often called the world's oldest teenager. Not long after taking over American Bandstand, he ended a ban on non-white performers by hosting black musicians such as Chuck Berry. Eventually, black and white musicians performed together on stage and the audience was desegregated. American Bandstand aired until 1989, and was one of the longest-running shows in American TV history. Of course, Dick hosted several game shows, none more successful than The Pyramid. Originally premiering as the $10,000 Pyramid on CBS in 1973, the show moved over to ABC in 1974. As the years went by, the top prize, and with it the show's title, changed over the years. ABC ended the show in 1980 and was then picked up by its original home, CBS, in 1982, running for 6 more years. Several spin-offs ran in syndication as well. Dick won 3 Emmys for hosting The Pyramid during the 1980s before his run as host ended in 1988. And even when he wasn't hosting, Dick was still associated with the show in some way. In the 1970s, he frequently appeared as a guest on the weekly syndicated $25,000 Pyramid, hosted by legendary MC Bill Cullen. In 1991, when the $100,000 Pyramid returned and was hosted by former Hollywood Squares host John Davidson, Dick sent a video from the Challenger's set to wish John well. And finally, in 2002, he was a guest on Donny Osmond's Reboot. Other game shows hosted by Dick included The Object Is, that was his first series, Missing Links, Scattergories, a reboot of It Takes Two on the Family Channel, and his last series, the 6-week-long Winning Lines in 2000. In 1972, Dick Clark became forever associated with New Year's Eve when he launched Dick Clark's New Year's Rockin' Eve, which is aired every December 31st from Times Square as they count down to the ball dropping at midnight with live and pre-recorded musical performances by well-known artists. Dick rang in the new year every year except for 1999 when, in lieu of Rockin' Eve, he co-hosted alongside ABC News anchor Peter Jennings as part of the network's day-long ABC 2000 Today coverage, and in 2004, after he suffered a stroke that December, ceding hosting duties that year to Regis Philbin. Dick would return in 2005, but the dysarthria that resulted from the stroke rendered him unable to speak clearly for the remainder of his life. He would be joined that year by his protege, Ryan Seacrest, who would join him every New Year's Eve until 2011, which would be Dick's last appearance, after which Ryan became the sole host. Dick Clark passed away from a heart attack in April 2012 at the age of 82. The announcer was Don Morrow. A native of Connecticut, Morrow's career in voiceover work dates back to the 1950s as the announcer of the short-lived ABC game show On Your Way. He also hosted another short-lived ABC game show called Camouflage in the early 1960s. From the 1950s to the 1980s, Morrow appeared either on camera or in voiceover for commercials from numerous brands including Sinclair Oil, True Cigarettes, and Ford. In 1988, he replaced Jay Stewart as the announcer on NBC's Sale of the Century, remaining on that show until its cancellation the following year. He also announced for the 1989 revival of Now You See It on CBS, and in 1997 did voiceover spots for the mega-hit movie Titanic. Don Morrow died in 2020 at the age of 93. Veteran announcer Bob Hilton would also sub for Morrow. The gameplay worked like this. 3 contestants competed, one of which was always a returning champion. Originally, the game began with the Challenger's Sprint Round. Each player was given $200 to start the round. Clark would ask a series of toss-up questions for 1 minute, for which players had to buzz in. Correct answers added $100 to a player's score, while incorrect answers deducted $100, and scores could go below 0. In the first episodes, players actually started with 0, and also if one player missed a question, either opponent could then buzz in to answer, like on Jeopardy! This was later changed so that only one player was given a chance to answer, and it was thrown out and if that player missed the question, similar to Sale of the Century. The player in the lead gained initial control for the first round. If 2 or more players were tied, one final sprint question was asked, with a correct answer or an incorrect answer by an opponent gaining control. Now, this round was briefly removed partway through the show's run in favor of one toss-up question, with the contestant who answered correctly scoring $100 and control of the round 1 board. If someone buzzed in and did not answer correctly, that player lost $100 and a new toss-up was given to the other 2 contestants. These rules were dropped in February of 1991 when the Challenger Sprint had been reinstated. The game then moved to the video wall, where 6 categories were introduced for the first round. The player in the lead after the Challenger Sprint, or the winner of the toss-up question when that round was not used, would pick one of the 6 categories, revealing 3 subcategories which acted as clues to the questions, valued at $150, $200, and $250 in order of increasing difficulty. This was later reduced to $100, $150, and $200 respectively. A correct answer would add the question's value to the player's score, while incorrect answers deducted it. After the subcategories were shown, each player then secretly chose one of the three questions using buttons on their podium, and their choices would affect the gameplay as follows. If all three players chose a different question, Dick would ask them one at a time in ascending value. If two players chose the same question but one chose another, they were still asked in ascending value, but the solo player had to answer their own question, while the question for the other two players became a toss-up. If a player buzzed in and was correct, they earned the money. If they were incorrect, that amount was deducted, and the other player could choose to either attempt to answer it or pass it without a penalty. And if all three players chose the same question, then all three question values immediately doubled, and it became a toss-up to all three players. The same toss-up rules applied. However, a contestant who answered it correctly could either end the category or attempt to answer any of the two remaining questions unopposed. Correctly answering the second question again gave the player the option to stop or try the third question. An incorrect answer on either the second or third question would deduct that question's doubled value, and that was the end of the category. In each case, the category was taken out of play, and the last contestant to give a correct answer chose the next one. Play continued until all 6 categories were played or until time ran out, whatever came first. In round 2, 6 new categories were shown and was played the same as before, but the question values were doubled to $300, $400, and $500 in each category, later reduced to $200, $300, and $400. As in round 1, the game continued until all 6 categories were played or when time was called. At the end of the round, any players with $0 or less were eliminated from the game. The final round was called, appropriately enough, the Final Challenge. One final category was shown with 3 question choices, each of which increased in payout odds based on difficulty. The easiest question paid even money, the middle question paid 2 to 1, and the hardest question paid 3 to 1. The contestants then had 15 seconds to secretly choose a question and decide how much of their score they wanted to wager on it. If more than one player chose the same question, only the one who placed the larger wager was allowed to answer it, and the other players were locked out of the round. Answering a question correctly won the value of the wager multiplied by the odds, while a miss deducted only the value of the wager. The player in the lead after this round won the game and returned as champion the next day, although all contestants kept what they had earned, if anything. Any players that tied came back on the next show as well. The Challengers was sponsored by Citibank, and Dick mentioned to the contestants at the start of the game that a Citibank Visa account was open in their name. They could later select a MasterCard if they wanted to, and all the money and benefits associated with the card were theirs to keep, regardless of the outcome, although Dick mentioned that the contestants could also choose to receive their winnings in cash if they didn't want to open an account. Champions remained on the show until they were defeated. In the rare instance where only one contestant finished the second round with a positive total, they had the option to skip the final challenge. If they decided to play it, however, the category and questions were presented as before, and the contestant chose one at a time, made a wager, and answered. After each correct response, they could either end the final challenge or take another question. The round ended when the contestant either played all 3 questions, gave an incorrect answer, or simply chose to stop. The challengers also had a bonus round called the Ultimate Challenge for the champion to take on, and it had 2 formats during the show's run. In the first format, a champion was only allowed to attempt the Ultimate Challenge if they won 3 games in a row. However, the winner of the show's preview episode, Doak Ferry, was allowed to play the Ultimate Challenge as a result of his victory. Once a champion qualified to play the Ultimate Challenge, the round would be played at the beginning of the next show. The champion was offered a choice of 2 categories to play. Once the category was selected, Dick would reveal the subjects of the 3 questions contained within in the order of difficulty. The champion would then play the questions in that order, and for each one would be allowed 5 seconds to think before being prompted for their answer. If the champion managed to answer all 3 questions correctly, they won a cash jackpot. Providing a wrong answer at any point ended the round, and the champion won nothing extra. The jackpot for the Ultimate Challenge was originally worth $50,000 and increased by $5,000 for every unsuccessful attempt. Ferry failed to complete the ultimate challenge on his second question, but for that pilot episode only, Dick awarded $1,000 for each correct answer, which Ferry was able to get 2 of them, and then the jackpot was set to $55,000 in the series premiere. Ferry was unable to win the necessary 3 games to qualify again, and as such, no champion afterward won more than 2 games during the show's first 2 weeks on the air. So, starting on September 17th, 1990, the rules were changed to add $1,000 to the jackpot each day it went unclaimed, regardless of whether or not the champion qualified to play for it. On September 24th, 1990, Larry Kaplan completed the ultimate challenge and won $60,000, the highest it ever got. Following this win, the jackpot was reset to $25,000 after a champion collected it, and it began to grow again from there. In the second format, which began on November 21st, 1990, the Ultimate Challenge was played at the end of every episode by that day's winner for an additional $10,000. Also, the Challenger Sprint round at the beginning of the show was dropped in favor of the single toss-up question I mentioned earlier. Initially, as before, the champion was presented with a choice of categories before the round began. Later, the choice of categories was dropped, and the champion was told the category at the outset of the round. Instead of needing to answer 3 questions correctly to win the Ultimate Challenge, the champion now only had to answer 1. However, the question could now, and often did, contain multiple answers, and all parts had to be answered correctly for the champion to win the $10,000. The exact date when the Ultimate Challenge was dropped from the show is not known, but it was retired sometime after February 15, 1991, after which the Challenger Sprint round was reinstated and it stayed on until the show's cancellation that fall. The show also had a Tournament of Champions, which was played the week of November 12, 1990, and its structure was similar to the one employed by Jeopardy during its own tournaments. 9 players faced off on the first 3 days of the tournament, with the 3 winners playing a 2-day cumulative final score. All 3 players kept whatever they earned in the 2 games, with the tournament winner earning an additional $25,000. Stan Newman won the November 9th episode and was allowed to compete in the tournament, interrupting his championship reign, which is not common on most game shows. Newman would go on to win the tournament on November 16th with over $40,000, including the $25,000 bonus for his triumph, along with his $31,000 Ultimate Challenge victory the following Monday. All helped make Stan Newman the Challenger's all-time money winner with $112,480 over 6 matches. This is 2 tournament wins plus 4 wins in regular play. The show also had a teachers tournament with a $10,000 bonus for the winner and a second invitational tournament the week of March 18, 1991. Lauren Birch won the invitational tournament by recording a total of $34,600 in the final, with the $10,000 bonus added to that, and the $46,075 won during his reign as champion. He would finish the show as the show's second biggest money winner with $90,675. That is how the Challengers was played. Now, we're going to step up to the challenge and grade it. As I said before, this show was very underrated. It was also criminally short-lived. The Challengers was based on an old game show from the late 1960s and early 70s, and improved by improving the gameplay and increasing the prize money a lot. The Challengers was also more topical than other game shows before or even since then, as the show frequently featured questions about current events. The producers saw this as a selling point and even billed itself as the best news in game shows and in trade ads as the one game show designed to meet the challenges of the 90s. Episodes were taped the weekend before their air dates, which were prominently displayed in the opening and on a screen behind Dick's podium. Generally, a week of episodes were taped on the Friday of the previous week, and this allowed such categories as This Week on TV and Today at the Movies to be used frequently, and questions were verified by Newsweek, back when it was a more reputable news source, and Don Morrow mentioned this at the midpoint of each episode. Unfortunately, despite this unique concept, the show was canceled after 1 year, although an entire 52 weeks of episode were produced before the show went off the air altogether. The reasons for its demise were threefold. The glut of syndicated shows entering the market, which resulted in some stations airing the Challengers either in late night or early morning slots, which meant not enough people could watch it, and even if it did get a good time slot, the Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy powerhouse or Family Feud with Ray Combs would crush it in the ratings, and barring that, it competed with syndicated news magazines like Entertainment Tonight or Inside Edition, court shows like The People's Court, and talk shows like Oprah Winfrey or Sally Jesse Raphael. And sadly, by 1990, game shows were starting to disappear from the American airwaves. But again, a short run does not equal a bad show. In fact, it was a great show, and of course, part of that can be attributed to Dick Clark. Dick was a master MC, and he showed his best form here like he did with nearly everything he did. As for the game itself, I thought it was challenging in its own right, but nowhere near as challenging as Jeopardy! I also thought it had a unique payoff structure, notably the final challenge, where contestants can double or even triple their wagers, something that's not done on Jeopardy! And a player could really run the gamut and walk out with some serious green if they managed to lock out their opponents, especially in the final challenge. And the only thing where I take away points is where they reduce the dollar values later in the run, as well as the inconsistency regarding the ultimate challenge. I think they should have left that the way it was throughout the show's run. Regardless, The Challengers was a great show with a great host, and with the possibility of a big payoff, the show met the challenge and gets a solid A. Now we'll talk about how I'd revive The Challengers if I had the chance. The show would still be played the same as before, but of course with more money up for grabs. Starting with the Challenger Sprint round, each player would be spotted with $500 to start the game, and each question was now worth $250. In round 1, the questions in each subcategory would be worth $250, $500, and $750 based on difficulty. All three contestants kept their money, but with a guaranteed minimum of $1,000 for third place and $2,000 for second, like on Jeopardy! The Ultimate Challenge would use the original rules, but with a grand prize starting at $100,000 and $5,000 added every day until claimed. However, champions will have to retire after 15 games, so that means they'll get 5 chances at the Ultimate Challenge. As for the host, I'd go with Ryan Seacrest, since he idolized Dick Clark when he was a kid. He has hosted game shows in the past and has done pretty well with them, and he continues Dick's tradition of rocking us into the new year. Anyway, that is my most recent episode of 15-Minute Game Show Reviews. I'll have another video out soon. Until then, remember to subscribe to my YouTube channel and follow me on Instagram and SpaceHey. I am the Geeky American Otaku, and the challenge is yours to have a Happy New Year.